Hi everyone, my name is Matt and welcome to my channel. A while back we painted some Fenrisian Wolves, and I got a few requests for more colors. Let's paint up a variety of wolves quickly using contrast paints and a few tricks. We also have a set of recipe cards to go along with this video, and you can download them and print them out. Details about how to get them will be down in the description below. This video will have 7 different color recipes, and I've added timestamps for each one in the description below. That way it's easy to reference back to it later. So let's grab our brushes and get started. After assembling the models, I undercoated them with white primer. You could use a light gray or bone-colored primer instead if you want to, but keep in mind that the end result will look slightly different from mine. Contrast paint can damage your brushes quickly, so rather than using a good brush for these models, I'll be using an older brush with a blunt tip for most of the work. I began with a mix of 2 parts Skeleton Horde contrast paint and 1 part Xandri dust. Sometimes I like to mix an opaque paint into a contrast paint. Contrast paint is fluid and semi-transparent. It flows off the raised edges and pools into the recesses, and it creates a variety of shades on the surface ranging from light to dark. If we mix an opaque paint into it, the mix will still perform like a regular contrast paint. However, the extra opacity will compress the range of values. We'll get slightly lighter shadows and slightly darker highlights, and the end result will look smoother. Next, I painted a layer of full-strength Skeleton Horde to darken the top part of the fur. Contrast paint is really easy to blend. I like to work on one section at a time and apply plenty of paint so it flows into all the recesses. Then I'll quickly rinse the brush, wipe it on a paper towel, and use the clean brush to blend out the edge of the wet paint. I'd like to continue darkening the back of the coat, so next I painted a layer of Nuln Oil over the top, and I blended it the same way as the last layer. Add some paint wherever you want to darken the fur, then rinse the brush, wipe it on a paper towel, and use the clean brush to blend the edge. I wanted to darken the fur just a little bit more, so I painted a second layer of Nuln Oil. You could add a third or fourth layer if you want it even darker. I started with a mix of 3 parts contrast medium and 1 part Skeleton Horde, and painted the entire model. The old brush is working really well for this kind of surface, compared to a sharp, new brush. I like to use a tapping kind of motion to make sure the paint gets into every crevice. If too much paint gets on the model and it starts to pool, just use the brush to soak it up. Next I painted a layer of Nuln Oil along the wolf's back and blended out the edge. Just work on one section at a time and apply plenty of paint. Rinse the brush, wipe it off on a paper towel, and use the clean brush to blend out the edge. I wanted to darken the fur a little bit more, so I painted a second layer of Nuln Oil along the back. For a really light gray wolf, I began with a mix of 4 parts contrast medium and 1 part storm vermin fur. This is the same mix I use for painting white cloth on my high elves. It's a really useful color, and I'd recommend mixing up a whole bottle of it. Now is a great time for me to ask you to do those YouTube things that we all love so much. If you're liking the video so far, please give it a like. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any future content. If you really like what I'm doing here and want to support the channel further, please consider Patreon or a YouTube channel membership. We have some perks including a Discord server, printer-friendly PDF files of our new recipe cards, and early access to videos. I want to darken some of the fur along the back, so I painted a layer of Nuln Oil and blended the wet paint just like on the other models. Lay down a generous amount of paint, rinse the brush, wipe it on a paper towel, and use the clean brush to blend out the edge. Some of the crevices could use a deeper shadow, so I grabbed a sharp brush and painted some Nuln Oil directly into the recesses. I'd like to paint another light gray wolf, but with some darker markings. I began just like the last one, with a mix of 4 parts contrast medium and 1 part storm vermin fur. Watch for bubbles as you apply the paint. Some of the bubbles will pop on their own as the paint settles, but you may need to get rid of some stubborn ones yourself. I like to use the brush and tap the bubbles, or gently blow some air on the model. Let's add some darker markings to the back of the wolf with Basilicanum gray. This color is a lot stronger than Nuln Oil, and it can be tricky to blend. If you don't work fast enough, the edge of the wet paint can dry and leave a tide mark. If that happens, sometimes I'll try scrubbing a bit with the brush and it may come off. That's one of the benefits of using an old brush for blending. If you're still having a tough time getting a smooth blend, you can try wetting the area first with a very small amount of water before applying the paint. Let's paint a brown wolf next, beginning with a mix of 4 parts contrast medium and 1 part Cygor brown. Cygor brown is a really strong color right out of the pot, and it's important to dilute it. You could add more or less medium if you want to vary the color slightly, especially if you're painting a lot of wolves and you want to vary the colors throughout the unit. Next I shaded along the back with Basilicanum gray, blending the paint in the same way as before. Apply plenty of paint, quickly rinse the brush, wipe it off on a paper towel, and then use the clean brush to soften the edge of the wet paint. I think 1 layer is dark enough for me, but you could apply a second layer if you want a darker finish. Let's paint another brown wolf, starting with a mix of 4 parts Skeleton Horde and 1 part Gorthor brown. This is another one of those mixes I like to make with contrast paint and opaque acrylic. This mix makes a nice tan kind of color, not too yellow, not too dark, and a good base for layering more colors on top of it. I want to use a rich, deep brown color on the back of the wolf. This is a mix of 4 parts contrast medium and 1 part Cygor brown, kind of like a very strong Agrax earth shade. I decided to paint the shade about halfway down the back, and then I blended out the edge with a clean brush. I also used a sharp brush to line some shade between the toes. I want to darken the fur with 1 more shade, and this time with Basilicanum gray. I blended out the paint just like before, lay down plenty of paint, rinse the brush, wipe it off on a paper towel, and then use the clean brush to blend out the edge. Let's paint a black wolf next, beginning with a base coat of Basilicanum gray. I'm starting with a gray paint rather than black, because the end result will have more depth and highlights. I don't really like the way the black contrast paints look on their own. I think they look a lot better with something underneath it, whether it's a solid gray base coat or a different contrast paint. Next, I shaded the wolf all over with my custom armor wash mix, which is equal parts Ratling Grime, Contrast Medium, and Lamian Medium. If you want to see how to mix it, check out this short video here. If you don't feel like mixing anything, you could use Nuln Oil instead, but you may need to apply a second layer for dark enough shadows. Ratling Grime has a slight brownish tone to it, and I think that warmth makes the black fur look more natural. With the shade dry, next I painted a layer of black Templar along the back, and I blended the edge of the paint while it was still wet. Apply plenty of paint, rinse the brush, wipe it off on a paper towel, and then use the clean brush to blend out the edge of the wet paint. With all the fur done, next I painted the mouths and gums with Screamer Pink. I'm not worried about getting any paint on the teeth. I think it's quicker to just forget about them for now, and then paint them once the pink is done. I shaded the mouths and gums next with Nuln Oil. Next I painted all the teeth with Xandri dust, leaving a thin, dark line around each tooth. I highlighted the ends of the teeth next with Bonewhite. Next I painted the eyes, noses, and the pads on their feet with black paint. I painted the pads with Eshin Gray next, leaving a narrow black outline. I also painted a narrow edge highlight on the ends of the noses. Finally, I added a dot of white at the back of each eye and a couple white dots on the tip of the nose. I didn't add highlights to these models, but if you'd like some ideas on how to highlight them, as well as to see how I did the bases, check out my other Fenrisian Wolves video down in the description. I'd like to give a big shout out to our supporters here on YouTube and Patreon. Thank you so much for your support, it really is a huge help. If you want to be like these amazing people and help support what I'm doing here, just click the join button down below or follow the Patreon link in the video description. Thank you. I think fur has to be my favorite surface for using contrast paints. In just a couple layers, you can have something that looks really good for very little effort. What are your favorite models to paint with contrast? Or what about models to avoid? Drop a comment below and share your thoughts. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching, and until next time, happy painting!